today I have a really great guest, so I'm glad that he's been patient and that we can get on with things here. Welcome again, my friend, Darrell Becker.
Thanks, Kira. It's great to be on your show.
Thank you, and I apologize for this disastrous beginning, but I guess shit happens. So before we realized that we were not being heard, we started talking about the trivium, and so I guess we'll start there before I ask my other questions. And you're really good at getting it out quickly, so I wouldn't even attempt to start you on that. So tell us about the trivium and why it's important.
All right. Well, the trivium is the first three of the 7 liberal arts classically taught back in antiquity. It's where you get your 5, 3, 4 Pythagorean triangle. This is the 3 and the 5, 3, 4. The 5 is the 5 senses. The 3 is the trivium. The 4 is the quadrivium. We're focusing on the trivium. That's starting with grammar, which is asking and answering substantial questions to who, what, where, and when. It is knowledge. Not much in the evaluation department. It's just taking in data. And that's the input part of computing. The second part is logic, or non-contradictory identification, asking and answering substantial questions related to why. Removing contradiction. If you go and put in informal logical fallacies into your search engine of choice, you're going to find out what the informal logical fallacies are. It's identifying these as little warning signs so you can hopefully not fool yourself or other people purposefully, and so that you can tell if someone else is also either accidentally or purposefully trying to fool you or themselves. And then that would be processing in computer lingo. And then finally, it would be classically called rhetoric, or asking and answering how, demonstrating practical applications of your knowledge and understanding, or your grammar and your logic. And that would be synonymous to wisdom if it's practical. And it's simply demonstrating what would be the practical application of all of what you've just put together. It would be also processing in computer lingo. So you have input, processing, and output, or knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. That is the trivium in a nutshell.
Wow. So why is it important that kids know this? And how is it that they're being kept from this?
Well, actually, children are born with this, but they can, of course, be unfortunately put into schools where they would be taught this out of order. So
Right.
just wanted to let you know that there are ways that these systems of knowing things and understanding them and finding practical applications, that's built into a child. You can see any 3-year-old, even a 5-year-old would have this built in. If they learn to use the logical fallacies, as I said, hey, type in the informal logical fallacies. If they are using those first, for example, like the appeal to authority, because I said so, because so-and-so's authority said so, they're starting with a conclusion or the why question, and they've stopped looking up the data of what specifically is it. Who, what, where, and when gives you a definition for what it is that you're building upon. Then you understand why, and then you go to how. So in many types of schools, for example, this methodology of how to learn any subject in the universe is often hidden. In other words, they're given the data to memorize and then repeat back, but they're not given the rationale or the why, and certainly not demonstrating the how the whole thing works as a whole in many types of school. So this is a damaged component in school, or if they happen to be receiving any education from any type of authority figure, and they did not give to the child an explicit or easily understandable method of the trivium in order. So it has to go in grammar, logic, and then rhetoric order, or knowledge, then understanding, and then the practical applications of your knowledge and understanding. Here, can I give you an example A child, right?
Yes, please.
Okay. A
Mm-hmm.
child is watching me build a fire. Okay. This is very, very simple. Like, I mean, I lived in the frozen Northeast for a long time. Building fires, very crucial. And really fun, too. I mean, children everywhere around the world love this. Even here in Hawaii, fires are certainly occasionally useful, mostly at night. And what happens is the child understands the components. That's the grammar. They see
Mm-hmm.
paper, tinder, they see little kindling, larger sticks, they see even split pieces of logs, small logs, and finally big logs. That's the grammar. These are the pieces. Don't need to evaluate them. You just need to understand what they are. The next part is the logic. How do you stack them in an order that actually makes a fire quickly or a fire slowly for a smolder fire that lasts for hours and hours but doesn't make a lot of heat? What is the procedure? And it was like, why are you making the fire in that way? And then, of course, then you see the actual application of putting it together, for example, to make a hot fire. So a little child will get the knowledge of all these parts. They will definitely know the name of each thing. So that's paper, that's kindling, those are small sticks, etc. Until, they understand the parts of them. These are abstractions because, paper is referring to universal paper, but that specific paper that's tangible. So they're learning, like they learn the words like table and paper. Those are abstractions, but they know that it could refer to specific pieces of paper, specific tables. So they're putting these things together to know knowledge, just to know the parts, the names of things. Then they understand how to build a fire. You see at a young age, they put the things together in the proper order. It makes a nice crackling little fire. It makes a nice amount of heat coming off of it. And then comes the practical application where they can demonstrate to themselves and to littler ones. They can demonstrate, see, no, you have to put more paper. No, see, no, you need more kindling now. Now you put the sticks. No, not the log yet. Not the log yet. Now you need sticks. Now you need small logs. See? And they understand how it works practically, and they demonstrate it to the smaller ones. This is how it's built in to children, unless, of course, it's damaged. Mm-hmm. So this is a simple methodology which it doesn't necessarily need to be taught to children as to be made explicit to children, because this is just the beginning. There's more tricks to the trivium. There's certainly a thing called the rhetorical triangle, which we could get into later, regarding the art of rhetoric or communication.
Mm-hmm.
So
how does it get damaged?
Damage would be the informal logical fallacies, which I mentioned, wherein instead of understanding why and removing contradiction, a child could be told, because I said so, because it's in the Bible, because so-and-so said so. That's an appeal to authority logical fallacy. Damage could happen in various other ways of each of the logical fallacies, just for them to not double-check their grammar, to not understand what the pieces of the fire are, that create fire, but they're just putting things together randomly, and they don't even understand the names of each of them or the rationale behind why they go in a certain order, as using the fire example. And someone could just be simply showing them only one way to make the fire, but not giving them further knowledge. Like maybe there's a thing where you're making a campfire, you're making it to smolder because you're going to go off and have a fun day. You want to come back to some coals. And you have this all contained for a smolder fire, different than having it roaring as a heat or cooking type fire. So you can see what I'm saying is if you don't understand why you are doing something, if you don't understand the components of what it's composed of, and to some extent in more complicated subject matter, you'd prefer to even understand who came up with fire. I know that's a really old one. Who came up with any specific topic that you're studying? When did they come up with it? What's the context? Where did they come up with it? Then you can understand more about what it is composed of. Then you're ready to understand why does it work in some ways and kind of work in other ways and not work at all in other ways. So it's damaged if it's out of order. It's damaged if there are any logical fallacies. There are fallacies of relevance, such as the red herring, such as saying that Darrell Becker could not possibly teach anything to anyone about the trivium because Darrell Becker said such and such on such and such a subject. Therefore, he doesn't know what he's talking about regarding the trivium. That is a fallacy of relevance. Either I do know something about the trivium, or I don't.
Right.
But whatever I've said before is irrelevant to whether this is useful or not to you. You have to evaluate that for yourself. Then there would be fallacies of equivocation, where I would simply say one type of word, meaning, for example, I could discuss the non-aggressible and how that relates to what some people call anarchism. We might get into that subject. And,
yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, and that could happen. It's going to happen soon. But what I'm saying is I could say that, and then what's going to happen is, of course, people will have an idea of anarchy, of anarchists,
right.
for example, and they could label that as if I'm a violent extremist, meaning because they have a different definition of anarchy and anarchists, they are passing on a similar definition to what I'm discussing, but it actually is a different definition. It's a fallacy of equivocation or confusing or conflating terms. So we don't have a solid definition of terms. These are two of the main ones. There's also, of course, the fallacies of the neglected aspect, meaning crucial elements of a discussion are not fully brought to light for all concerned parties. And that is important because it is one of the most, I would say, confusing elements in any type of discussion. We have something relevant that is not being revealed, and therefore we have confusion. Those are just three quick ways. Again, for the audience listening, you can put in your search engine 42 logical fallacies. There's a beautiful PDF which will just disclose to you some of the major ones. There's a website called Fallacy a Day, which will send them to you as an email. There's also Don't Fallacy Me, Bro, spelled as I just said, bro being short for brother. And don'tfallacybro.com definitely has beautiful games where you could play the games and study the fallacies. These are ways of learning whether you have fooled yourself, whether someone is unfortunately unconsciously already fooled and trying to fool you in addition, or whether they're purposefully trying to fool you. I would usually say it's number 2, by the way. Most people are not consciously trying to fool you. Most people are actually just fooled themselves and they're just passing it along.
Right. Yeah, that's true. They most people have, I guess, sort of bought into some belief package and then are just passing that package along in their conversations.
It's nothing personal.
Right. Right, absolutely. It's not. Most of the time. 99% of the time, maybe.
Yes.
Maybe a little more on the internet.
I look for evidence. I assume beneficence or benevolence in general. And I need to see evidence of any type of malevolent methods or situations going on. I may as well just keep that to myself. I don't usually see a lot of need for bringing up accusations against anyone. In fact, if anything, that's what I would call usually a failure on my part of my own equilibrium. So on my website, voluntaryvisions.com, I do cover the trivium. I also, that's covering specifically the subject of methods that are explicit, meaning easy to explain to yourself and others, to create internal intellectual harmony. As your intellectual terrain is yours, you own it. So this is a method to create it as nice and balanced or having equilibrium. I also have methods to create emotional equilibrium. And those pretty much refer to what some people call, unfortunately, nonviolent communication, which I prefer to call voluntary communication. I differ majorly in the way I utilize the main core tenets of that methodology. I don't subscribe to the various axioms that came about from Marshall Rosenberg, who is credited with inventing and discovering what is called nonviolent communication. Instead, I like the major 8 components of it, and that's more of a way of utilizing emotional equilibrium. So that's a different subject, I realize.
Yes. So can you repeat the sites that you were just telling us about? Some of the
So,
people in the chat room really want to look at that again.
okay. So specifically, you can find my work under voluntaryvisions.com, spelled in the standard English language way. And that is where my communications work is listed, including a bunch of what we have just discussed.
Okay.
That would be one main thing. The other part is, of course, the 42 fallacies. You can just put that in your search engine. You'd see Michael Labossier's document PDF. You can also go to don'tfallacymebro.com. That would be ways of playing a little game to learn your informal logical fallacies. And a fallacyAday.com. That's where you can learn in 42 days. You'll get them emailed to you. You'll learn about 42 fallacies. There's more than 200 that have been identified, but honestly, they're mostly variations on fallacies of relevance, again, which is, whether something is actually germane to what is being applicably discussed. There's fallacies of equivocation where you have different people or the same person using different definitions and flipping back and forth between them. So there's confusion on understanding the terms.
Right.
And the fallacies of the neglected aspect. That's where you have missing information that'd be critical to comprehension. So, yeah, that's... I just wanted to be clear on that. Fallacies are critical. Pointing out fallacies of other people, I do not recommend, unless, like me, the person is saying explicitly, Kira, you and everyone in your chat over there, you have permission to point out any fallacies that I say while I'm saying it. Of course, try not to interrupt me, but just as the next question, I'm ready to hear it.
Right. Yeah, because it can get almost addictive, I would say, for the person pointing them out, and then it gets really annoying for the receivers.
Right. This is what
I would imagine.
What I mean by permission. I give explicit permission. Because I'm interested in upping my game, but there are many people who do not really wish for having their fallacies pointed out to them, especially if they do not have an understanding of the study of informal logical fallacies. And so the whole subject would be brand new to them, and it does seem like they are receiving a diagnosis, that that there's something wrong with them. So that goes into my studies of creating harmonious, empathetic situations. I make a bridge between myself and others, what I call the bridge of empathy, by understanding who I am, what's going on in me, my observations, what do I feel. I've got a list of various motivations, which are called values and desires, that I understand they cause my feelings. My observations and what's going on around me goes through the filter of what I value and desire, and that causes the emotions that I feel. And then from there, I take 100% responsibility, I mean the ability to respond, for my emotional terrain, and I make, in my mind, silently, a win-win strategy, if I can, of how am I going to stay in balance, emotionally speaking. And that's what I do silently, in microseconds if I can manage it, and minutes or longer if it has some type of conflict going on that I'm trying to balance in myself. And that's what's going on in me. Then I flip it. I want to see the other person. What's going on in them? What do they observe, including what might they be thinking thought-wise? And what can they be feeling? So I can tell, by a tone of someone's voice, oh my God, this got some pretty harsh production situations going on. So I can hear the frustration going on, and I can hear that, and I can observe what would be going on in live in Kira, perhaps, when we got some production things that are a little less than smooth. I can imagine that they value a type of smooth communication, right? That they're valuing a type of connection which they wish for, and for their guests to be sharing information which is useful to their audience. So I'm working to do that. I'm almost done, by the way. And then finally, their strategy. They're going to say, Darrell, I'm going to call you back. We're going to have a good connection in a moment. And then I hear them on their strategy. I can visualize it.
Yeah.
Now, if I had any problems, I can, there's 4 ways of making it like a problem. I would identify those ways too. And so these are things that I explore at depth. And for people who are listening and you want to support the book that I'm writing regarding communications, you can go to voluntaryvisions.com book support page. I'm definitely offering people to pre-order this book covering these subjects. I fully describe what it is that I'm doing to give you an idea of the value that I'm intending to deliver.
Mm-hmm. Great. So far, so good. So let me ask you, I'm really interested in the way that you translate this, say to a 9-year-old, because I'm a mother of a 9-year-old, so and I definitely can see its value, but I've also seen, folks that are really interested in the trivium. I've also seen it kind of play out as sort of for lack of a better word, elitist. It comes off as kind of elitist, not with you, but with a lot of people that are really, really into it. So I certainly wouldn't want, if I'm teaching my child this, I really like the elements that you've added to it, like with this bridge of compassion, because for myself and my own studies, I've, I think it's important to practice compassion as a spiritual practice, which isn't really connected to any one religion, but is connected kind of to them all, because it's kind of its own spiritual tradition, I guess, that you could find in any tradition. So, so I'm really interested in what you're doing, because you're adding this element to it that I haven't seen before, and so it interests me in the subject more, because I really hate elitism, and it turns me off. Put it that way.
Okay, so we want to make this accessible, we want to make it understandable, and we want to definitely not alienate anyone. That's definitely been one of my purposes too. This is why I'm trying to write the book that I am, because I want to put these tools out there in a way that's understandable. The first part of the book will certainly have the method fully right there, done, for the people who want to skip to the punch. The next part will be fleshing out each moment for the folks who like stories and the folks who like to have a lot more examples to understand them, because they can't just simply take a method and use it. There's a lot of people like that too. But here, I've done many interviews on this subject, so I know it kind of backward and forward. The first step is, what is the purpose of the communication that I'm attempting? So with a 9-year-old, especially someone like, for example, if you to your son, I need to understand that at every moment of the communication, that's part of it. What is the purpose of it? And that's something that can be easily taught for them too. It's something that can be made explicit. Like, I'm communicating to you right now because, and I have a list of why. Like, I understand, like, because I want to connect with you because you're my son, because I've got important things to share with you. So as you get closer and closer to what's called adult, which technically could happen close to age 12, then you have more components to use to more fluidly flow as a powerful individual in this world without having anyone tip you over. I want you to be strong so that no one can tip you over. That's what the informal logical fallacies can do for you. If you know them, it's not so easy for someone to tip you over with those ones. So when I do voluntary communication, that's having skills to balance your emotional terrain. That is making it so that no one can tip me over emotionally. So I have two things. We have the intellectual side, and I need skill sets for that. We have the emotional side, and I need skill sets for those. And both of them relate to communication. Now, some would simply posit that what I say about balancing the emotional terrain revolves within the realm of rhetorical skill, or rhetoric, which is the third of the three, of the first three in the trivium. That's true. I mean, it's, of course, when it comes to communication, first you communicate to yourself, So you silently ask and answer, what are the purposes of my communication? A second question, how strong is this bridge of empathy? First, to myself. How strong am I? How strong am I standing strong, or do I feel tipsy because I've got some emotions going on? And how strong is it within the other person? I can evaluate that with tone of voice, with body language. That's easy. Then, of course, if I just have text to go on, word usage. The more words, the better. The more words, the easier I can evaluate this question. And I need to understand that, like the bridge from one person to themselves. So, for example, myself to myself, Kira to Kira, and then from me to Kira. I need to understand all of that intellectually and emotionally to have a solid basis. If I'm going to explain this to a 9-year-old, I'm going to explain it as, I've got some really kick-ass tools. It's going to take a little while to explain and show you all of them. Here's how they work. And I would need to give example after example of them. I like to use the example of Kung Fu because I'm a beginner in Kung Fu, and that means I've been doing it less than 11 years. So I have very beginning skill set. And the purpose of Kung Fu, it means hard work, or more classically, skill transcending surface level beauty. It is not just a method of combat. That's the simplistic version. It's a method of exercise for the purpose of gaining durability, strength, endurance, flexibility. And there's, of course, grace and suppleness. Those are qualities, including virtue. So you never hurt anyone. You never want to cause damage. It's much easier to cause damage than to fix it. I know this because I am an Oriental medical practitioner and acupuncturist. So it's really understanding the purpose and virtue of what's going on. What I'm trying to say is that, there's a reason behind these skill sets. The reason is, of course, I want to be untippable intellectually because I have my informal logical fallacy filter turned on. I have my grammar scan turned on. So every word that Kira says, I'm scanning it so I understand the definition, or I'll ask a question. And she's hopefully scanning the words I say. So she'll, if she doesn't understand a definition or that we're not on the same page, she'll ask me through scanning the grammar and scanning the logic. And then we both need to understand the practical applications, and that's intellectual harmony or balance. Can't be tipped over if you have that. Emotionally, I need to know, how am I observing everything, including my thoughts? What am I emotionally feeling? What are the values and desires that I have that cause my own feelings, and for that matter, that cause Kira's feelings? I need to see both sides. And then for the final part, what is the strategy going on? Both my own internal strategy, like I'm using this many words to explain myself, and I'm going to be done soon to let you ask me some questions, I promise. But I'm keeping that in mind. Like, I have to keep in mind my audience. How much patience does my audience have before I got to be done with this statement for clarity? So I'm keeping that in mind, and it'll be done, and then she'll ask me questions, maybe even make examples and statements, and I'll be quiet and I will listen. And so that's all about understanding emotional harmony skills. So this is showing how to relate to people, first starting with oneself, and second to other people, so that it's harder for people to push you over. And just like with properly done Qigong and Kung Fu, not so that you can push people over and attack them, but so that whether they mean to push you over or accidentally try to because they're just hurt themselves, you can not be tipping over, and you can even offer them a hand up, as they can easily just tip themselves over. This is what you might have seen me do on Facebook, or attempt to do,
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, you went right into what my next question was going to be about, how it relates to the universal life force energy, or the chi, or the ki, or whatever you want to call it. As a practitioner of Oriental medicine, it's all connected. So I just want you to talk about that for a little bit, those connections a little more.
Okay, you want me to talk about Qi as related to what I've just been discussing? Okay.
Yes.
Wow, that's a great question. I was not ready for it, but I'm going to do my best for that one.
Okay.
Um, it is mysterious, but I think has been verified that we are not just structural beings having substance and organs and muscles and bones, etc., and tissues. And we're not just biochemical beings, from the larger chemistries to the smaller enzymes and the subtle interactions of the vital amines, which are called vitamins. We're
Mhm.
not just chemistry, we're not just structure, we are also a bioenergetic being. We have a measurable bioenergetic charge all around us and interpenetrating all aspects of ourselves. And there are times where this energy seems to be within harmony, and we've got great power, as can be demonstrated in a variety of applications. I would say athletically, it can be demonstrated in terms of simple energy-wise where someone has good health and a lack of dis-ease. So those are situations of energy. This has been called qi in Chinese medicine for a very long time. And there are times where the qi of the body is doing great and a person has lots of energy. There's times where a person is depleted and obviously tired, and they are seeking help with this. So there are times where a subject matter, such as, oh God, another Darrell droning on about the trivium, I can't take this any longer. They just don't have the capacity to listen to me at that
Right.
point. Yeah, this is why listening to podcasts is voluntary. So, and this is why
Mhm.
listening to The Bridge is hopefully voluntary too, except for
Yes.
you NSA people who are charged with this as a job. So besides you folks, the rest of us, we're just voluntarily tuning in. And
Mhm.
there are aspects to that where you can get tired, because I have heard that as a criticism of myself, I was given the diagnosis of I sound like a used car salesman, the way I'm selling these
Hmm.
ideas and methods. That was a critique, or an unrequested diagnosis on my part. I understand that. I just talk the way I talk, and I cannot apparently seem to please everyone all the time.
Right.
So
Right.
I learned things from critiques like that. I learned that maybe there's other ways of communicating that would be more applicable to other people. I'd love to sound maybe in some way that I can communicate to that specific person. But until that time, I'm just going to roll with it and go and communicate as I see fit, which is this way right now. So there is energy, apparently. I make no claims to understand the full mechanisms of energy as it flows through the body. I do make claims that in observing Chinese medical treatments for some 16 years at this point, I can see that there's a correlation between treatments which adjust the structure through the use of various visceral and structural manipulation, moving vertebrae, we're talking moving organs, putting things back in place, massage, etc. There is chemical manipulation, where we give herbal formulas and nutraceuticals, or various powerful vitamin and nutritional supplements, which are measured to be somewhat biocompatible to the client. And finally, there are energetic manipulations, where there can be used, of course, the traditional acupuncture needles. We can use heat on the acupoints themselves, which is called moxibustion. We can use a variety of modern tools, including lasers, magnets, and various frequency machines, doing anything from applying radio waves, which is traditionally called Rife machines, to various ultrasound and other types of frequencies. Magnetic fields, for example, are highly powerful. This affects the magnetic field of the person or the client, whoever that is. So we have all these ways of manipulating energy, chemistry, and structure, and I make no claims to say that I heal anyone, because I don't do that. I only heal one person, that's Darrell. I help people. They pay me because they like the results that they essentially are addressing as something that's coming from my treatment. I would say that I'm like a conductor and they are the orchestra. It's still on them to orchestrate what's going on. And I'm going to try to manipulate things as best I can to create a beneficial situation. So that's what I would say regarding energy as far as related to the other components of medicine. And I'll say further, anyone can do this. I certainly started showing my daughter how to put needles in me when she was 8. It's very easy. I would say that there are other things, such as herbs, which are far more difficult because unless you have some training, you don't really understand how to find what's biocompatible. And of course, visceral manipulation of the vertebrae, you could really hurt someone if you don't know what you're doing. So there's that.
Give us a little bit more about the biocompatible. Tell us a little more about that, because I want to understand that more.
Sure.
How do you
How do I do it? Well, there's many ways to do it. I was trained by a chiropractor. That's how I started. I did go through Oriental Medical College, as all acupuncturists do. I basically learned from a chiropractor methods that you guys can look up, though I would not go to Wikipedia, but look up elsewhere. The methods are called applied kinesiology. Kinesiology literally being the science of motion. But applied kinesiology refers to a specific chiropractic technique devised by George Goodhart back in the 60s. He had a protege named Alan Beardall who came up with clinical kinesiology, which was an expansion of that method, and it utilized the acupuncture meridians. This was devised in the 70s and more perfected in the 80s until Alan Beardall's death, which I think was around 85 or so, or 86. But Alan Beardall had protege himself, a teacher, Dr. Richard Warman, who was one of Alan Beardall's students, who took these tips from his two teachers, both George Goodhart and Alan Beardall, and advanced further and further. And these are methods of measuring what to treat, when to treat it, for how long, and in what way. They utilized, in simplistic ways, the strength and weaknesses of various muscles and the positions of the body related to various acupuncture points. This is critical. It's understanding that no human is standard. Every human is unique. So the type of vitamin C that I require that is most compatible for me versus the type that is compatible for Kira versus the type that is compatible for Kira's 9-year-old son, these could be very different. So instead of just guessing, like some practitioners would do, a clinical kinesiologist or applied kinesiologist or someone like myself who utilized, I would say, innovated methods which came from those two disciplines would be able to isolate what is biocompatible to the individual and to see whether it is going to be useful or not. And through correlation, we would start to see, the measuring before, during, and after, and of course across the span of time of a bunch of different treatments, you get to see whether you're getting good results and you're saying, okay, that's pretty close. You don't really know for sure, even if I had all the diagnostic laboratory exams that I wish I could run, but my clients cannot afford. You don't ever really know everything. This is not Star Trek. We don't have one of those diagnostic tools like a medical tricorder. We have only a variety of the methods, that some of which I'm describing. The ancient Chinese methods include pulse diagnosis, tongue diagnosis, the diagnosis of the pressure points on the front and back of the body, and the diagnosis of the belly through various pressure points on there. These are ancient methodologies that are used. The more modern ones I described are within the purview of an applied or clinical kinesiologist, and then, of course, the innovated methods which my teacher has shown to me. These are ways of finding out what is biocompatible, what's going to actually be a useful format of medicine for the client, whoever that client is, and what are the results of that. This is critical information as a practitioner.
Yeah. And definitely something I don't see a lot of in allopathic medicine. I see a lot of guessing going on in allopathic medicine as well. I'm curious if you treat a lot of people with autoimmune disease and if you see good results there.
Yes, and yes. So yeah, That's the fast way of answering your question, Kira.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
uh, everyone, I mean, this is what got me in the business. I
Mhm.
started with autoimmune disease, and
Mhm.
that's why I got into the business. I had allergies starting from around age 10 when my cat, I really wouldn't want to call him my cat. He was the family cat. We had a relationship, but he owned himself. You know,
Right.
I loved
Right.
him, but he was already old when I was born, and so when I was 10, he died. So he lived his good long cat span of life, and when
Mhm.
he died, I became noticeably allergic to other cats and dogs, and other allergies ensued, including, for example, the chemical dusts which would come up from my dad's wood shop, using all types of particle board, plywood, etc., varnish, etc. All the dusts from the downstairs shop would be eventually coming upstairs. I did try to work as a cabinet maker's assistant for my dad, so I was fully immersed in some of it sometimes. My diet was not biocompatible to me. I did not understand this. I was damaged in ways that I did not understand until more modern times. So by the time I was 20, living more independently in Vermont, I moved away from New York to Vermont. In case you listeners over there across the pond cannot tell my voice, this is a version of a New York accent, by the way. So there are many versions of a New York accent. This is one of them. So I guess what I'm saying is that I had allergies, which is an autoimmune overreaction. That's what it means basically.
Right.
So autoimmune disease is usually referring to overreaction or underreaction. And yes, I get to see this plenty in every individual, and it's one of the things that I measure for every single time using the tools that I have. And I try to bring things back into balance depending on what the critical issue is. So there would be a component of that to every single person as well. What's the autoimmune situation for the person? As the same way as there's also a component for what's the toxicological situation for the person. And
Sure.
there would be also what's the deficiency situation for the person.
Mhm.
So those are all measurable components, and there are specifics in the business that you go about learning to measure these things.
That's wonderful. I mean, for myself, I also, deal with autoimmune bullshit for a long time, and just had to figure it out myself. So, I figured out that I was gluten intolerant 2 years ago, but until then, I suffered big time.
Mm. Yeah, so that's a major one, huh? I mean,
Yeah, big,
yeah. And I
big
didn't
one.
know that. That's what was. So I used to be allergic to cats and dogs, I said, and I have a cat now. So that makes you understand something right there. And I would say
Hmm.
you could use that information to understand it's not the cat, it's the person
Right,
and their diet.
right,
And also, as I've learned, it's the cat's diet too. A cat
right.
who's kept indoors eating a diet of kibble and they never get to eat their healthy diet by hunting or some
Hmm.
aspects of healthy diets, they have disease. They will excrete things through their skin, their dander, etc., and that will
Hmm.
produce a higher quality of allergen for people who already have that weakness in them. The weakness
Hmm.
is usually GI related. If you have a respiratory
Hmm.
condition, if you have a dermatological skin condition, you likely
Hmm.
have a gastrointestinal condition, whether you know it or
Hmm.
not. If you treated the
If you
GI
have
condition,
a neurological condition, it's likely the GI too.
yes, I concur. It's really difficult
Yes.
for you to have a neurological condition without having a GI condition. And so that
Hmm.
would be that you're right, Kara. That's a third one that I'd like to include. And um, luckily, though, when you have a neurological condition, one of the major things I look for is toxins, specifically heavy
Hmm.
metals and aspects of
Hmm.
chemistry and chemicals that's going on.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, and I had peripheral neuropathy and constant migraines.
Mm.
And so they, I was like, why do I have? So they tell me, you have fibromyalgia, and that just basically means we don't fucking know what to do with you. Let's just
Yes.
call it something so we can bill insurance. That's what that means. All of the syndromes that are now out there, and wow, la di da, they each have a specific drug that's on the market for them too, just to medicate the symptom instead of looking at the cause, right? La di da, how does that happen? But anyway, so they tell you have all this stuff, and I'm like, well, why do I have idiopathic neuropathy? Why do I have constant migraines? Why am I cold all the time? How does this fit into your diagnosis? And it doesn't, So as soon as I stopped eating gluten, my neuropathy went away in 3 days. 3 days. And I haven't had a migraine since. I quit eating it.
So simple, huh? And
yeah,
it can be difficult for some people, though, because the damage is profound, or they stop
I'm still working on it. I still have really bad arthritis from my teens. The damage is done.
Well, then it comes to a need for regeneration. A lot easier for your 9-year-old son than it is for you. Because that's what happens when you have the damage is going on for a longer period of time. The repair is going to be required to be going on for a longer period of time. If you don't understand the repair mechanisms, then you're not really likely getting the job done. So if you guys who are listening, say you don't know what to do, you don't know how to find a holistic healthcare practitioner in your area who's going to be able to find you the results you wish for, that's a service that I offer. You can contact me through darrellbeckeracupuncture.com. That's my health website. That's an easy one to do. And that's where I serve people in many places in the world. I've got someone over the Netherlands where I'm trying to find them a person. I basically just try to look up, understand what are they looking for, like what kind of conditions are they looking to solve, what type of money and time commitment can they give to solving it, and then I look for relevant practitioners in their area. And of course, if you happen to be on the big island of Hawaii, well, I'm ready to serve you right here in real time. But that's a limited hangout, so I understand.
Yeah.
And of course, for those who've got real money, well, geez, I could send you to my teacher, Dr. Rick Warman, and that would be over in Vermont, by the way. So there are many different ways. Idiopathic
road trip.
yeah. I have some people who are going to do that, and I have one of my clients flew all the way from LA to see my teacher. So that makes sense to me, for those who have the capacity to do that. Because, that's a student of both George Goodhart and Alan Beardall, and someone who gets results in, I would say, a much more expeditious way than I am presently able to get results, generally speaking. There's basically, here's the humble thing about being a practitioner. You are not everyone's practitioner. You are some people's practitioner. There are some people who really love my style of communicating, how my bedside manner. I'm not using my practitioner voice. My practitioner voice is a little more calm. Right now, I'm giving my lecture voice. I'm ready to teach a lesson on these things. See, so I like to understand what is the person looking for. Do they want a male or female practitioner? Where are they? And I could use the skill of my own way of interviewing practitioners around the world to find and match people to other practitioners that can get the job done. And it does come down to those important key moments of what are they looking for to get done, and how much money and time are they willing to put towards the problem, because it's going to cost money and time. That's the thing.
Yes.
The entitlement attitude, which is one of the, I would say, the 4 Ds of disconnected communication, of the deserve-oriented language, to speak to oneself that you deserve free healthcare. You desire free healthcare. I understand that. Hell, I desire to be paid for this this audio production, but I'm not gonna. So so it's okay.
I desire to get paid for it too.
Yeah, so does Kira. But
Yeah.
But you guys out there, you can donate to the Bridge and to Kira Young. You know how to do that, I hope, on the website.
yes, on my podcast storage
Exactly.
page.
Yeah. So there are people out there who are luckily will do that, but for the rest of you guys, you're going to get it for free. And for people who are expecting excellent quality healthcare for free, I would have to say that perhaps maybe you consider instead that for folks who are delivering you a service of hard work at the incredible expense it took for us to get our various accreditation papers. I cannot tell you how many tens of thousands of dollars it took to get where I'm at right now, to have these papers up on my wall.
Man.
You have to understand that we paid hard in time and money and effort, and many of us, even relationships died in the midst of going through the process of learning. And that happens. So we went through that, and we have skill. We can get the job done. So to give us compensation for the work that we do would be very sweet and equitable. It's a trade.
Mm-hmm.
To expect that we're giving it to you for free is not likely going to be as equitable. However, some of us, we're ready to give you a little bit of pro bono, a little bit of free help here and there, such as, can you tell me what to do, Darrell, right now? Like I'm living in Antwerp in Belgium, right? Darrell, how am I going to find that? Or I'm living in Dublin in Ireland. Like, how am I going to find a practitioner? And I'd be like saying, type the name of your medical conditions, the diagnoses you've been given, into your search engine, and put behind that holistic medical treatment, holistic health treatment, alternative medical care for. Use these words into your search engine, as well as the locality of where you exist. Use these words, for example, naturopathic doctor, holistic chiropractor, and acupuncturist, oriental medical practitioner. Use these words. You will find a wide variety of practitioners in your area. And then you go about actually looking at the people. You can call them up on the phone. Most of them will give you a free little interview so you can see whether you can stomach the sound of their voice, whether they answer your questions, how much time do they give you pro bono for free. And that's your interview process. So I'm giving you some free advice right now. This is how you can treat yourself through using the professionals in your area. You can just find someone.
I would just like to point out, too, that, of course, we all desire free healthcare, but when it's delivered to us in a package that says free on it, it's never actually really free. So I just want to point that out as well, because it's somebody pays for it, and we even pay for it when we think it's free.
Yes.
So, somehow it gets paid for.
It's true.
Whether it seems like it is or not, but coming from the native way, and especially the Lakota way, the medicine people are required to give it away, but the community is also required to give back. There's an agreement, a social contract. So it's really hard to navigate that for modern day native practitioners. That's why a lot of them are becoming doctors. Can really do both. So, just putting that out there.
I agree with you. And, because this is the bridge, this is totally your show, Kara, did you have any questions? Because would you like to drive the direction of our conversation, or you want to just have me hold forth on various topics of which I'm knowledgeable?
Oh, hey, you know what? If you want to get into something and I'm leading you in a different direction, I want you to build upon what you've already expressed.
Okay. I have covered the trivium, or a method of having intellectual internal harmony or balance. I did not cover what I call voluntary communication that much, except for to say, to know your own observations, including the thoughts that you're having, to know your feelings, meaning at any given point, maybe you could identify more than just frustration as a surface feeling. Maybe you could identify underneath that a sadness because you're lacking something. Under that, you could understand that what creates your feelings is not your observations. What creates your feelings are the values and desires that you have based upon what you observe. So no one gets to make you feel anything, except, of course, when they physically actually like land a punch and they literally made you feel something. When something happens, someone types something at you or says something to you, you notice you feel something because you value something. For example, when someone calls me a name on Facebook, they give me some type of label, for example, an unrequested diagnosis. I receive that, and I understand that I might have a feeling of like a little bit of frustration because I have a value for clear communication, meaning that clearly, to clearly communicate, I would like the subject matter being discussed to be focused on, not giving me a diagnosis which I did not request and has no treatment plan attached to it. See, as a practitioner, people pay me for a diagnosis because I also deliver an effective treatment plan, or at least I claim that the purpose of the treatment plan is to be effective. And they get to see how many treatments it takes to get effect. And, you know, if I do a good job, they keep coming back. And if I'm not doing a good enough job, I try to send them to someone else, or they lose patience after however many treatments and move on to someone else anyway. If I just deliver diagnoses that had no treatment plan attached to it, like to say, you're an a-hole, that is a diagnosis, has no treatment plan. There is no treatment for a-hole. There is only the word a-hole, and it is not descriptive of what the cause is. You could say, Darrell, you're frustrated. You have these expectations and demands, and that has been a diagnosis that I've been delivered. I've got various expectations and demands is what was, that was the way it was seen. In reality, I have desires and values, and I'm trying to get to them through strategies that are tangible. So I know the difference between an abstraction, such as clear communication, and a tangible strategy, which is polite conversation, which is typed from one person to another, back and forward. So when I get a diagnosis that I did not request coming at me, giving me a name, for example, I have to translate that. People use that method to give unrequested diagnoses as a way of understanding. That's their method of creating more understanding. To say that I am some type of disinformation shill, that's a diagnosis, because I'm promoting an application of what some people call nonviolent communication. I specifically apply 8 parts of that methodology as a tool simply because I find it useful, and I promote to use it if it's useful for you, not like saying you're wrong to not use it, but I'm promoting a specific part of it. Again, not with all the axioms that Marshall Rosenberg came up with, most of which I would not agree with, though I might say I understand why some people would value them. And so that's an application of it. If someone gives me a demand, this is another example. They demand that I always put a disclaimer, for example, in every production that I do, that nonviolent communication through Marshall Rosenberg has links to the CIA's MK Ultra program. This has been a claim, right? I've heard this claim, I've read this claim, and to me I say, okay, you know what? Carl Rogers, the teacher of Marshall Rosenberg, does seem to have some links to the CIA's MK Ultra program. This seems to be slightly verifiable. I haven't seen it connect directly Marshall Rosenberg, his student, to that, though I knew that, certainly the two people hung out together. Carl Rogers, I believe, died a while ago, but Marshall Rosenberg is still alive and still promoting nonviolent communication in his way. So the demand is actually a request. It's a tragic or slightly tragic, semi-clumsy way of making a request of me. That's what I get. When I hear a demand coming at me, I translate that in my head as they're making a request of me. a request which
Okay.
I am not obligated to fulfill, but I might choose to, just to make harmony.
Mm-hmm.
And there's two other ways of creating a disconnect between people. That would be deserve-oriented language. We all deserve free healthcare. Entitlement speak.
Mm-hmm.
I could understand that and translate it as a desire for some ease and efficiency, which is an abstraction.
Mm-hmm.
A desire for fulfilling a sense of justice or equity or equality. These are abstractions. And I could understand that they can have the abstraction, for example, justice, and then they could have an idea of a tangible strategy that they might promote, such as socialism, to have all things equalized by a lack of actual tangible ownership as a strategy. Now, I don't want that strategy personally, nor do I want that foisted on myself or others, but I understand the motive behind it, which might be different for different people. So when I have to read in or listen to the person to understand what it is that motivates them to communicate what it is they're trying to say. And finally, the ultimate is the denial of responsibility. I was just taking orders. I had to shoot your dog because the dog could have threatened me and the other officers. That's an example. For people who live in the United States, there's a lot of dogs being shot because of a variety of police are going to various addresses, and they use this seeing a dog as to say they needed to kill the dog in order to promote their own safety. That was their strategy. And denying that they are responsible because they have the costume, the uniform, and the badge, and the protection, legally speaking, in the United States at the very least, is another method of ease and efficiency. They have it so easy in their mind because they're not the one who is response-able, who is able to respond. It's the other people, the politicians who drafted the laws and legislation. They're the people they're passing the buck, basically, to other people to have the onus of obligation and responsibility. So those are four ways, basically: making demands, unrequested diagnoses, deserve-oriented language, and denial of responsibility. And I translate them again. A demand is a clumsy way of making a request. A diagnosis is a clumsy way of usually aiming for understanding. To put me in a box, give me a label, anarchist, or you could say, someone who's into that woo-woo, non-proven medical sciences or quasi-medical sciences. You could put me in a box for ease of understanding. You could also be doing deserve-oriented language. We all deserve free healthcare, as an example, aiming for ease and efficiency, perhaps. And then the denial of responsibility, again, could be ease and efficiency. So I keep these in mind to make sure that hopefully they're not coming out of me, which they usually are not unless I myself am out of balance, or to see if they're coming at me. And that's what I mean by emotional equilibrium and my own emotional internal terrain being balanced. So you see, I put these two together. You can understand now this is the gist of the book that I'm writing. And that's what I wanted to expound upon a little with more detail.
Excellent. So I'm getting a little bit more now about what you mean when you sort of translate it in your head. The, demands, the deserve-oriented language, and the unrequested diagnosis. So in the beginning, I didn't really get why you keep translating that in your head, but I'm understanding it more now.
Yeah, the purpose is because I don't take it personally. Because I want to stand strong. If you ever seen real combat, it's the person who's the most calm is usually the one who's going to be standing at the end. In real communication, it's like that too. The person who's the most calm does not take anything personally, anything at all. Whether it's their own internal dialogue from themselves to themselves, which is usually the ultimate. And that's, to me, like if you're going to study these methods, you might start there and stop there, and that's the best you can do. And good, because that's all I would ever ask for anyone to do. Or the more advanced tactics, which is now you've got yourself balanced. Now you're going to see how balanced is the other person. And if you don't if you have a way of translating what's coming at you, even if the other person is willfully trying to get you off balance, at the very least you can understand perhaps why do they want to get you off balance. Usually it's not that way. Usually they are already off balance and they just want to pull you down with them. If you'd like to keep standing and maybe even offer them a hand up, make a bridge. And so that's why I go into bridging methods. I've got a series of ways to make a bridge with the person, and they don't always succeed. If the person does not want to make a bridge with me, obviously I can't make a bridge with them,
Right.
But if they, in case they do, I try to understand on the intellectual side, what is the purpose of our communication? Like, what do you want from me? Why are we talking? What would you like from me? And on the emotional side, what's alive in myself and what's alive in them? Meaning, specifically, how do they observe everything? What are they feeling? What motivates those feelings? Like, there are lists. For you listeners, I know some people are going to have problems with the Center for Nonviolent Communication, but if you just Google needs inventory / nonviolent communication, and I'm sorry if you use your search engine for that, not necessarily Google, you could find a list of these values and desires. The motivating factors are what I call them. And that would show you basically an abstraction of why you have feelings. Anyone who's had a profound psychedelic experience would notice that they have changes to their emotions. And this, in my opinion, would be evidence to support the idea that if you change your values and desires in whatever method that you do that, you will change what it is that you actually emotionally feel. So that would be my claim, basically, that you are born with essential physiological needs. As you grow, you build values and desires based upon what seems the most useful and relevant, what makes life more wonderful, and what achieves your meaning and purpose to existence. Like, why are you even drawing breath right now? Why are you even living right now? And everyone has an answer to that question, why are you alive right now? I'm sure, Kira, you've got, you want to see what happens with your life and your son's life and your friends' lives and your family, everyone, even me, maybe, a little bit. And that's some of the reasons why you're alive, but the reasons are numerous. So the purpose is to make a bridge between yourself and another person. You can speak specifically to finding out what it is that the other person values or desires relevant to what's being discussed. To say, for example, just as an example, I was given a diagnosis of disinformation shill, and I could simply launch into, does it help to expose me? Do you want clarity, for other people to have clarity and yourself to have clarity by thinking that you have exposed me as a disinformation shill? Is that what you're after? And clarity is something that everyone wants periodically. I would say everyone wants it a little bit all the time, but sometimes more than others. And that's me attempting to make a connection, a bridge, to say, I understand what's important to you. I have that important to me as well, and I'm trying to communicate. I could communicate to what the person observes. When I typed this, you interpreted it as that. And did I get that correctly? So I'm demonstrating I'm attentive. I'm an active reader or listener. And that could be another way of making a bridge. I could also speak to their strategies and actions. When, I see them rallying their own supporters and asking for various conclusions to be universally held regarding who I am, as an example. This is asking, them seeking support, and this is, to acknowledge what they're doing. Not evaluating it, but just, saying I'm aware of that. The one that I would never, ever do nowadays is mention what the other person is feeling unless they actually cared about my understanding of that. That's a very private place, what people are feeling. So I usually don't try to make a bridge that way unless with some people some rare people, basically, they are so looking for acknowledgement about what they are emotionally feeling that would be a great way to make a bridge with them. But usually not in the realm of an angry conflict. That's usually not the thing I would go to. I mean,
So what about like in making a bridge with someone, for instance, would you, if someone come to you and they can only trade something for your services, like they're poor and they have like their own work, or maybe, you know, like their chickens or something like that, they could trade with you. Would you work with them? Would you make a bridge in that regard?
it's a case by case basis. I get to choose.
Yeah.
And so at every given point, what is the purpose of the communication? And I get to evaluate the cost-benefit analysis to myself to take that chicken or to take that trade or to say,
Right.
no, this is not worth it to me because they're offering me a live chicken. And I'm just both like, I'm
Not
just
good
not
with
ready.
live chickens.
You know, I'm not ready to off the chicken and eat it. And even though I have a video on how to do it, but I'm just not emotionally and equipment-wise feeling like ready to do it, you know. And I'm also not ready to take care of the chicken and, like, you know, see about getting eggs from the chicken. I have to check in with my landlord, and, you know, and my housemates. Oh my God, there's all this work, you know. So I have to, at every point, we have a cost-benefit analysis going on. That's the purpose of understanding. Why are you communicating? Or why are you initiating the communication in the first place? And sometimes it's worth it, and sometimes it's not, and sometimes we change our mind, and we get to be flexible with ourselves and with hopefully other people within reason. You know, this is a soft science. So, yeah, I mean, when it comes to my work, I work sometimes, give a pro bono or a free treatment here and there. I will do a little bit of trade here and there because someone will have something really useful to me, and I'll be ready to take it for sure. And each aspect is important to understand. I just try to keep in mind what's going on. I mean, the other ways of making a bridge are I can speak about what's real and what, like, the way I observe the situation. And that could be relevant to a person if they care, as long as they care about the way I see the situation. And they don't interpret it as a negation of how they see it, as if I'm saying the way I see it is more important than the way they see it. So I have to be careful with that one. I could also speak to, emotionally speaking, what I feel, as long as they don't take it as a negation of what they are emotionally feeling and saying that what I feel is more important. I could speak to my values and desires. That might be one of the other methods, because I might be speaking, this is an abstraction, like if I value calm, clear communication, they might also that same thing too. So I might try to, you know, preface that with, like, you know, you might want this too, but this is what I'm after. And I'm trying to, you know, connect with them through what it is that I'm after. And my strategies, like I'm going to try to couch my words using things that demonstrate a respect and understanding of the other person's position. And that's my strategy, and I'm naming it. Are you interested in adopting the strategy as well, or maybe not so much? You know, and I'm saying it's totally voluntary. No one is required to adopt my strategies. Using these methods of knowing observations, knowing the emotions or feelings, knowing the values as abstractions, and knowing the strategies and actions which are tangible. These are critical ways 8 ways of making a bridge, speaking to them, speaking to me. And those are just some of the other things. I mean, the 9th way, of course, is just speaking of anything relevant to why the other person is alive and drawing breath. What's relevant to them? Why are they interested in living today? And that could be a way of making a bridge. So that's what I wanted to let your listeners know a little bit, since this is the bridge. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. When you were talking before about this not taking things personally, I think I'm sort of a natural at that. So, but it did take time to learn it, but I guess I really just taught myself that. So I didn't even know there was, strategies out there for learning that. But I think maybe some people are more naturals at it than others, but it really does work. I work in emergency management and talk to people on the worst day of their lives, and they're going nuts, saying all kinds of stuff that has nothing to do with me, but could disturb me if I was allowed it to, Yeah, so I've always tried to kind of use compassion there and not take things personally.
I figured I could just use like 3 metaphors just to make more explicit what I've been describing tonight. And so first off is the splinters in the mind, emotional splinters such as the other person's, I would say, passively emulated or traumatically induced situations that pop emotions right up to them based upon what they observe and what's going on in them. And that could certainly get in the way. And then there would be intellectual splinters, cognitive dissonance. That's having these competing ideas in one's mind where you don't want to force other people on the one hand, and then there'd be this idea that everyone deserves free health care that is forced upon them, that other people would be forced to pay for your stuff, your health care. So that would be a contradiction, and for them to look at the contradiction, there'd be sparks flying or friction in their mind if they try to hold the two ideas, called cognitive dissonance. And so I would identify what the splinters are for each person. The more I communicate with them, I start putting flags around these splinters, and I don't touch the splinter. Just like in a real person, I use the metaphor because I don't want to poke at the splinter. I don't even want to mention the splinter unless the person has some knowledge of my work and wants to know about their splinters. They're interested in setting up a dialogue with me about that subject. I want to just understand what are these minefields that I would wish to not step on, and I'd like to just be aware of that and be really respectful to what could be there in them, instead of just, as my old way, when I learned the informal logical fallacies, I went right to poking at people's splinters, to fully going and demonstrating my knowledge of their cognitive dissonance or their logical fallacies and pointing them out to them when they never requested them, which of course is an unrequested diagnosis or could be interpreted that way. I try to make sure not to do that. So each of those that's one metaphor, is the splinters in the mind. My own splinters, as I still keep removing them, identifying and removing, and the other person who I communicate with. The second metaphor is, of course, the bridge of empathy. And here we are on the bridge, and I've described 9 methods, to make a bridge of empathy between myself and the other person. But before I do that, to make a bridge of empathy from myself to myself, so that I am standing strong and I'm not so easy to tip over. And those would be important because I want a bridge to the other person to go to my final metaphor, which is an 18-wheeler of logic. For example, if I have some piece of information I want to convey, I want to make it very understandable to the person. That's like all using supportive evidence, what some people would call a logical approach. I want to have supportive evidence for my conclusions or my claims. I want to be clear about what the claims are, and I want to be clear about what the supportive evidence that I'm pointing to is. Well, before I even go there, I need to know that I have a solid bridge of empathy to drive my logic truck on. My 18-wheeler of logic is going to drive on something. I'm not just going to hurl my logic over at an unwilling island and have this truck of logic like land in a fiery wreck, and the other person says, "Oh yeah," and they hurl their truck over at my island, and we're not really able to clearly communicate because there's a lack of empathy. The bridge of empathy is, I respect you, you respect me, we demonstrate that respect by various means, by demonstrating how we communicate with each other. And then we start, with understanding, okay, here's the logic. We're going to unpack the logic from my truck. There's a manifest on this 18-wheeler. You can look at each supportive evidence fact. You can take from it what you wish from. You can leave the rest on the truck. It'll come back to my island. And you could send your own truck over there, and I'll unpack it. Hopefully you include a manifest of what you packed on there. And we have time. This is the internet. I've got time to look at each bit of supportive evidence. Like, what is the claim? What is the supportive evidence used to make the claim? You see, so, I understand the splinters, I make the bridge, got the 18-wheeler of logic, and that's what I wanted to convey.
Well, thank you. Can we go back to anarchy?
Of course.
All right, cool. Because I have some good associations with that word. And it sounds like you probably do as well. But take it away.
Literally, anarchy means an for a lack of or no, archy from an archon or ruler. So it means no ruler. Anarchy does not mean no rules. There are many people who completely, I would say, misdefine this word. It never means no rules. It never meant chaos as the application of no rules. It means no ruler. There are lots of places where there's no specific ruler, but there certainly are rules going on. So in there are many people who are very peaceful anarchists. They have an application of this, and there are many stripes of anarchy. They search on Wikipedia that gives a pretty good definition of a bunch of them. And there are the different applications of anarchy. Those who wish for a greater emphasis on the respect of individual choice and freedom, which some would call the market, meaning free interaction and trade between one individual and another without a third party getting in between the trade. And that would be the market, basically, or the free market. That is going on all the time. It's been going on from basically for probably at this point hundreds of thousands of years, long time. Just one person peacefully trading with the other, and both of them feeling more wealthy from the exchange. This is just reality. The word "the market" has gotten rather negative connotations, unfortunately. So I tried to be very careful with my grammar or my words, knowing my definitions and understanding what the audience of my words is, how they are defining the words that I'm using. So that's very critical. But I have respect for people's choices myself.
Yeah.
I'm not afraid very much of other people's choices. I do know that some other people are afraid of what other people might be choosing. And to manage this fear, there are many people who would wish for a third party to force everyone to do a certain thing or not do a certain thing. I would disagree with that strategy as being a desirable situation for myself. I don't disagree with it as being a desirable strategy for them. The aspect comes from what is being voluntarily adhered to and what is being forced upon people. My website is called Voluntary Visions. It's not called Coercive Visions. There's a reason for that. Okay. I wish for what is voluntary as all interactions. I do not find value myself in what is coerced upon people. I find that as a problem, and I look for solutions to such problems.
Well, that sounds good to me. I think that's kind of what a lot of people who listen to this show and listen to a lot of the other shows on People's Internet Radio are really interested. I mean, in seeking solutions to these different ways that we're looking at things, and I think we've really seen what the forcing and involuntary how that strategy has worked, and it's not working for a lot of us. So let's figure out some other ways. I'm all for that.
Right.
And really, that's
and I'm
essential.
Like one of the links I sent you a bunch earlier today was going through the purposes of why am I interested in this pursuit of intellectual and emotional internal equilibrium. And the purpose of that is that when people have an explicit, meaning explainable to themselves first and to other people second, methodology of creating harmony internally, they have a chance of making it happen interpersonally. When they have harmony interpersonally and internally, they have a chance of collecting together in harmonious ways. When they collect together in harmonious ways, they have a way of being creative. When they are creative with each other, they have a way of innovating solutions, such as what you've just alluded to. You have problems? Well, that's what creative people can do, is they can innovate solutions. When they innovate solutions, they can find an obstacle, pick any obstacle you wish for, and they can create an opportunity, a way of creating a good or service that helps to get around or over or through or past whatever the obstacle is. So, yeah, go ahead and name any obstacle. I'd love to give you a tangible example based upon what you'd have in mind. Any obstacle.
Okay. Any obstacle. I'd like to get off the grid. That takes more money than I have.
Okay.
That's an obstacle.
Yeah. I'm
what I
facing that
desire.
obstacle too.
Yeah.
So I can imagine things that what would be going on. You're not alone in this one too, right? You want to get off grid. I want to get off grid. I'm living where electricity is way more expensive than in Virginia. I can tell you that. This is the most expensive electricity in the United States of America. This is it. I live right where it is.
Yep.
So I don't have to go into why that is. What I need is a solution for it. And you have that situation over there, you want to be not constantly paying a utility company. So there are other people who want this too. So the first step is, I can imagine I don't have a perfect example of how to fix everyone's problem, but I'm just envisioning it, blue sky moment here. I would say I would make a meetup group, meetup.com, or make some other way of, even free flyers printed up and just getting people together who would like a solution to this. You come together with people, and as long as you can have clear communication, such as the way I've been outlining it, you'd be able to come together and innovate ways of, hey, how are we all going to, provide this solution? What are the options out there? And so I know of some options that you've never heard of. Wood gasification devices, for example, that are powerful, mega, they're certainly multi-kilowatt devices. They're large. They're enough for multiple households. More expensive than one person might have, that you might have the money for. But a bunch of you would have the money for. That's just an example for places that have clouds and snow and things like that. I don't have snow where I live. I'm on the big island of Hawaii. But it's an example of constantly, using a method where you get together with people, you look at all the options, each of you researching options and things like that. On this island, as an example, since electricity is so expensive, there seems to be more than 100 separate solar and alternative energy companies ready to set up a situation, give you a pricing and everything like that, and maintain your system. There's all these companies that are competing. So they're all right here. That's just an example of it. It comes down to the, how are you going to spread the cost of it in order to get to where it is that you want to do it? There are people, if you go to solar1234.com, that guy, I believe I'm spacing on his name, but he is definitely an expert in the production of power, and how to do that. I learned about this guy on thesurvivalpodcast.com. That's THE survivalpodcast.com. That's Jack Spirko. I learned of on that show, it covers all aspects of preparedness, which includes survival. And that
Right.
includes, of course, making one's own power. And
Hmm.
so there would be, he has expert panels, like an expert on cooking, an expert on various things related to a variety of preparedness needs. And one of them is an expert on home energy production. And that's why I dropped that website of
Okay.
solar1234.com. That these are like ways of saying, like, hey, there's already people who are innovating these solutions.
Hmm.
You get together with people so you can spread your costs, so you can then innovate. You have multiple people researching things because we all have busy lives, so you spread things out. You have different people researching different things instead of everyone researching the same thing. And you come
Right.
together, and like every periodically you can see steps forward. Like another aspect related to the trivium is a thing coming from David Allen called "Getting Things Done." So people can look
Hmm.
up GTD and "Getting Things Done." So that's where you understand what are your objectives. That's like your purpose for what you're trying to achieve. What are the actions you need to do to get to those objectives? So to get to off the grid living, you need actions, meaning like actionable situations where power is being produced, where food is being produced. Because you want to be off the power grid. Maybe you want to be off the food grid too. Maybe you want to be off the water grid. You want to be off all the grids, right? So what it is that you specifically are after is your objectives. The actions that you're going to take could include specific machinery and equipment, including a wood gasifier, for example, or even small ways of making alcohol and switching your car over to run on that, as an example. Just like brewing it up in small devices, batch by batch, and adding it to your gas tank, lowering your fuel costs. There are all these methods that can be researched. And then you'd need the final part, which is understanding your resources. What resources do you have? How much money? How much time? Where can resources be attained for free or cheap? Or what are the expenses? So you know the resources that you need to get to the actions that you need to get to your objectives. That's keeping things in a nice little straight line to get to your actionable situation. So that is my quick way of answering I'm sorry, my slow way of answering a question.
Yeah, and I mean, I just need more knowledge of, um, you know, electrical, how putting things together electrically and all that, because I don't understand that at all too. So there's probably a lot I could do with little money that I just don't know because I haven't learned it yet. But
Right. And that's why we have people who've already engineered this. YouTube is an amazing, powerful
yeah,
engine of teachers. People out there who go there, any type of questions you have, how do I make energy in my own home? You can type that into YouTube, and you'll have a wide variety of subject matter to research. But like I mentioned, many hands make light work. If you do collect together, instead of trying to do it all yourself, you would find that put it all together, and you and several of your friends or a small group of you can spread out so that you can actually understand your objectives from a variety of perspectives, since everyone's an individual. You can understand the actions that you need to take to get there, and you could start identifying resources that you need to take those actions to get to your objectives. See, this is the trivium as well. You have the grammar of the
hmm
situation, the who, what, and where, and when. This is, the situation, who you are, and what, and what is your situation? What are your resources? Where are you? When are you? Who else is there
hmm
too? Who else is in this get Kira Young free energy and off the grid situation? Who's in this group? And you know your grammar backwards and forwards, and you're never done with grammar work. You always have more grammar to research. You understand why.
right.
Why are you trying to do this? And why is it likely to work or kind of work or not work, depending on your applications of it. And then comes the implementation, called rhetoric or wisdom or output. So input, processing, output, knowledge, understanding, and wisdom, or practical applications of knowledge and understanding. This is, children have this built in. It's
Yes,
those
they
of
do.
us, those of us who have been through any type of schooling, unfortunately. The more schooling you've been through, the more damage that can happen to you. I know this. I mean, I have a master's degree and I've been through tons of schooling. It's not a good thing. I did it
Right.
because I had to. Luckily, I did it in such a way as it was specifically the type of education covering the subject of healthcare that I'm interested in, and very small bits of other subjects that I have less interest in. So rather than some type of well-rounded and completely unfocused bachelor's degree, I went straight to a master's of science in Oriental medicine, which took a long time, but I did it. And that's one way to go about it, is just understanding, how's your process going to do? That was a great question. Like, how are you going to, that's an obstacle, and it's an opportunity, because here's the opportunity of it. Once you get it going, once you, create the situation, there are people out there like Ben Lowry, Lowery. He achieved financial independence at a very young age through constantly making new ways of passive income and then selling those ways to other people. If you actually made this way of, Kira Young's get off the grid system, you'd be selling that as a methodology to other people. How to make the meetup group, how to vet the members of your group so that you're going to get effective members who will do things that are effective. How you're going to spread the costs around in an equitable way that everyone can sign on to and agree to. And then the full-on implementation, how you're going to acquire the resources needed to take those actions and get to those outcomes.
Wow, that sounds like a lot of work, though, too. I mean,
Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
I would be, screaming and yelling and hollering and very happy just to do it for myself. But yeah, to help other people, that would be some serious icing on that cake.
Well,
that gluten-free cake.
Yeah. And hey, I acknowledge the fundamental difficulties. It's kind of like if you said, Darrell, I want to be a holistic medical practitioner and Oriental medical practitioner. I want to be an acupuncturist, Darrell. And I'd be like, yeah? Okay. Well, there are colleges I could direct you to get your papers. Or I would say you could go online and learn everything for free about Oriental medicine and acupuncture. It's all on there for free. All of it. It's all there.
Mm-hmm.
All you'd have to do is apply yourself, find a willing practitioner that you could go get treatments from. They would probably show you bit by bit every little damn thing they do if they're a good practitioner. If they're stingy and they want to keep their secrets to themselves, well, you probably wouldn't really be desiring to work with them. And that would be a way of doing it. But would you admit that this is a long road and difficult? Yeah, it is, because you haven't done it before. It looks difficult when you haven't done it. It's about as easy as it is for the child to build a fire. If the child was told that this is really difficult, only an adult can make a fire, and they're like, it's scary, you could burn yourself, you don't have what it takes, you're not allowed to touch the fire, stay away from the fire. You learn the fear of, you don't know how to learn this. A child does not have that fear. They have instead optimism. They're born with optimism and an understanding of the natural laws and limits that they are constantly attempting to comprehend. To be the child,
right.
We have the child inside of us, but we're tempered with the adult, which is another aspect of ourselves too. So it looks on the surface like getting off the grid is difficult. In reality, I would say it's merely a procedure, especially for those of you who own your own place. Then you're not going through the procedure of contacting your landlady or landlord, and you're not going,
right.
You're not talking to your housemates. You're just going for it. You're applying it to your own property.
Right.
This is the fundamental that I wanted to at least throw in before I forget it. Boundaries are critical for harmony. So when I mentioned these boundaries, when I mentioned the emotional internal terrain being managed and being balanced, and I gave you a way of making that happen, and I mentioned the intellectual internal terrain, and I gave you the trivium to make that happen. I was mentioning them because that's just an elementary beginning part. There's no such thing as conflict if ownership and boundaries and property is mutually known and understood and respected. So, for example, I was invited on your show to talk, and I can imagine how much more I have to talk before you want to get your words in. So I want to not trespass on that. I want to get my ideas clearly across to you and your audience. I understand that you own this show and that I am on your property. So I'm going by your rules, essentially, as best as I can understand them. But you invited me, so you want to hear what I have to say on various subjects. So I'm keeping the boundaries understood. While I'm talking, I own my words, and you're keeping the politeness of not interrupting me every other word. So that's a respect of my ownership of what I own is my words. So if there's an issue where someone doesn't know what they own, there's the potential for conflict. So if someone thinks that they deserve free health care from me and every other healthcare practitioner simply because I went through processes that show me how to deliver this service, then they essentially say that I don't own my service, that everyone owns it, therefore no one really owns it. And so there's a confusion over ownership and boundaries and property. So the non-aggression principle, which is another aspect that I have on my website, is merely the explicit understanding of not initiating force or aggression or fraud, and knowing and respecting one's own and other people's boundaries, which can be called property or usage agreements that span a period of space and time. So, that's it explicitly.
Yeah, I mean, that seems like that it would be pretty valuable for anybody wanting to live in some sort of community, especially one that's experimenting with anarchy or, anarchist principles. Seems like it would be of value in that situation.
Yeah, I think so. I think there would be there's a lot of applications. Intentional communities, which is the modern word for communes back in the 60s and 70s, are a multifaceted way of people to collect together and, by virtue of specialization and mutual support of each other and understanding boundaries, most critically, people can live together in a variety of capacities, not just collective ownership, but also individual ownership, but to have some aspects of coming together for the purposes of achieving certain goals. So I was part of a co-housing community which I helped to create back in Vermont. It was not well conceived, it did not last, but it produced for a short period of time some degree of harmony, of people living in close proximity and people respecting each other's boundaries and ownership and property. I had my place, other people had their places, and we came together voluntarily without coercion. And when we worked together, we had some degree of clarity and understanding. And if there was a lack of clarity and understanding, as had happened at least once, there was the conflict. There was the lack of boundaries and ownership. So whenever people do not respect, or first of all understand and then respect boundaries and usage agreements, my house is my house, your place is your place, you don't just come into my place to use the bathroom, unless we have an agreement. It's on you to have your place in your bathroom. I don't just go into your place to, essentially chill out in like a nice private place because my house is too, crowded right now. No, that's your space because I understand boundaries. So it's all in the understanding of boundaries. When can only be conflict, as far as I can tell, when boundaries are not mutually known and understood and respected. And that would be my claim.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't see any reason to dispute that claim. I really don't.
Oh, you could try.
I could. But that's, I guess my desire for harmony is greater. No, I can't dispute that because I can think of several examples immediately at how you're right.
Yeah.
So,
And
yeah, I mean, just off the top of my head.
oh yeah, if you want to, how about? Can you give an example? Or
Uh, gosh, I don't want to. The one I'm thinking of is one I don't really want to talk about.
oh, okay. I gotta
Yeah.
push that one out of your mind then.
Yes.
I can think of boundaries in property. Here's one. If I type words as a comment into someone else's post on Facebook, I do
Mm-hmm.
consider that their post is their property. They
Right.
that's I could consider it as a boundary. They wish for it to be theirs. And people could make the claim that because it's on Facebook, it's all public and there's no ownership of it. But that doesn't matter as much as what matters to create harmony. If they want the post, that their original post, the OP, to be theirs, then it may as well be theirs because there's a huge number of posts going on, and why would I need
Right.
that one? Why would I need to be lingering in a place that's not technically mine? Like I got to wander around into a wedding that was not invited to recently. And I
Right.
do mean wander around, but I didn't go like into the tent and into the festivities and join in the dancing.
Mm-hmm.
But I understood that wedding was their property, and I'm using this as an example. And
Right.
it was fun and all to like be like, part of. I was with my girlfriend. I was in a couple, and I kind of blended in like as couples who are wandering around outside of the wedding. But I didn't really fully want to be a wedding crasher. I didn't want to like go in there
Right.
and have some drinks on the house and like start to like hobnob with various people there and pretend that I know the couple getting married. That's ridiculous. So
Yeah.
it's an understanding of ownership, and the only reason I went that far was because, honestly, it was like it was kind of on a lark. It's like there was a light show going on. Wanted to investigate what the light show was, and come upon it, and I realized, oh, this light show is a really fun-looking wedding. And
Wow. Cool.
I was kind of on the periphery, but I really just like made sure to not like go directly into where it's their boundaries. And the same thing for an original post on Facebook. The same thing for any place wherein I can tell that other people desire it to be theirs, and it's a sacredness. It's kind of like people who always desire to say grace or blessings upon a meal. This is a sacredness that people wish to do, to have a ritual before going into a sweat lodge, to have some type of procedure.
Right.
So, yeah, that's basically. I'm coming to the end of my time period, by the way.
Yes,
Gotta tell
you
you.
are.
Yeah. So.
Yes. So we can certainly wrap it up. I wanted to give you a little bit of extra time because of the issues and technical problems that we had in the beginning. But go ahead and wrap it up, and I appreciate your willingness to remain calm with me
Yep.
as we struggled through the technical issues. And I appreciate my co-hosts for trying to help me out and for helping me out, and everybody in the chat room. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. And just to plug my work again, I'm at voluntaryvisions.com, darrellbeckeracupuncture.com. I urge you to go to Voluntary Visions Support My Book Project page if you're interested in pre-ordering my book. That's a way of supporting me. Or just even sending any type of encouraging words my way. I really appreciate that. And thank you so much, Kira. I'd love to be back on your show
Thank
any
you.
old day.
I would love to have you back, and if you're interested at some point, I would like to set up some time with you and maybe one other person, so we can do a bridge that way as well. And I really appreciate your time and the things that you're encouraging. I, I respect it, and I've gotten a lot out of the information that you've given me this far, and so I'm interested in learning more and staying connected with you.
Thank you, Kara. I really appreciate that.
Okay. Well, we'll catch everybody next time. Thank you.